Welcome back to Dine Northwest. Here with us, as always, is Heather Donahoe.
Good afternoon.
Well, our next guest is Melanie Farini, owner of Dynamik Space, a local business helping people reach their dream of owning and operating a restaurant. Melanie, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Sean and Heather.
Well, can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, I have a diverse background. It started as a real estate analyst, including valuating restaurant appraisals and buying and selling them. And then it moved into an architect. I went to school to be an architect, and I'm licensed as an architect. Then I worked for a brand and identity firm, and now I have my own firm since 2000, and we're also a licensed general contractor. So it really includes a lot of things, I guess.
So Melanie, you've kind of devoted yourself at this point in your career to helping people who have a dream of starting a restaurant, and we know that a lot of people have that dream. So what was it that prompted you to get into this line of work?
Well, restaurants and cafes are very complex projects compared to other project types. And because of the diverse background we have, it really fits well because you really need to know the branding, and you really need to know the physical space and how to put it together, and then also how to build it. So we thought restaurants were really ideal for that. And personally, I have a passion for restaurants as well. So it's a fun project type to work on. Really passionate entrepreneurs start restaurants. So put that all together. It's a fun project type to work on. Now,
from the beginning, what does it sort of take to start a restaurant in the first place?
Well, it takes a lot of passion. It takes a lot of drive to open a restaurant, so that's as an individual or a team. It's also really helpful to have previous restaurant experience or have people on your team that have that experience in management, operations, and also personal capital. A lot of people don't understand. Besides getting loans, you really need to have a good amount of savings too.
So for that, I guess, aspiring restaurant operator, maybe they've got what they think is a winning meatball recipe, and they are ready to get moving. They want to start their restaurant. What is the first step for someone who wants to open a restaurant? What should they focus on first?
I think the first step would be, if they haven't worked in a restaurant, to work in a restaurant. So they can really see if that truly is something they would want to own. They can see how it's operated. They can be a part of the hours you have to work. They can be a part of the staff and the personalities, and I think that's really the first thing. So even if you have a killer recipe, if you don't enjoy owning a restaurant, it's not going to be successful.
Now, talk about securing financing for a moment. How difficult is it this day and age to secure enough financing to start your own place?
It's actually more difficult than it was before. What a lot of the banks, angel investors are looking for is really to have your own capital, at least 50%. And then that doesn't even include your own savings after you open up a restaurant. You still have to plan for 6 months to a year's worth of savings in the bank of income you may not be getting. So a lot of banks want to see that. Now, if you try to get financing from an angel investor or maybe family, they might not require that as much. But the SBA and banks, they're really looking hard into that, and they really want you to have some kind of experience or people on your team having good experience.
So just really quickly, for some of our listeners who may not be familiar with the terminology, can you explain what an angel investor is?
Yeah, an angel investor in Seattle has a lot of angel investor companies, and a lot of them do look at technology to invest in and manufacturing, but there are angel investment groups also looking at restaurant concepts, we're finding, but it really has to be a sound plan, really thought through. So a typical business and marketing plan they want to see as well. So you can get financing that way as long as you've really thought through your plan and it looks like a sound business.
So what are some of the biggest hurdles that people face when they're trying to start a restaurant?
I think some of the biggest hurdles that we see is really not putting together the plan ahead of time, and so because of that, they're having a hard time getting financing. If you have a good plan, a good concept package includes floor plans, some good renderings, some good brand identity, competitive analysis. If you have good sound packages, you'll have many times landlords that are coming to you that want to partner with you a lot of times and help you construct your restaurant. So it's really having a good sound plan. Obviously, the recipe and the menu is key as well. I mean, that's always key in a restaurant. That's a given. But if you have a sound plan, it's going to be easier to get financing and easier to find a location as well.
So Melanie, let's say that someone has started this process and they are kind of in the home stretch, the final few weeks leading up to that grand opening. What are some of the things that they really need to focus on there? Some of those, tying up loose ends, kind of those last minute details that maybe they hadn't thought about previously.
We find a lot of restaurateurs are so focused in the build out and they're at the construction site. And we often tell them that they should probably be more looking into their operations, their training and their staff, making sure they have good key people, and their social media is in place. They're really looking at social media, and they have a way to track online the comments that are made about the restaurant, so they're ready to go. So then if there are any negative comments, then they're able to track those quickly. So it's really having a process to do that, and leave the construction and build out to the experts, really. So it's really
So how important is that first week of operation in order for the long-term success for a restaurant?
It's very important, and I think something to keep in mind is not to necessarily advertise when you're actually opening. It's really to advertise an opening after you do some kind of a soft opening that's been planned out. You test out your recipes, you invite family and friends, and even maybe some people in the media that you trust to give you some good feedback. And then once you have that correct, and the service and the staff, and your staff is trained to your brand and who you are and understanding your recipes, then you have an official date. So really that first week should be really devoted to still thinking you're really not open. It's kind of like a practice run still.
So looking at, would you recommend owning a restaurant to anybody?
No, I wouldn't recommend it to anyone, but but I think it's definitely a great business if you're very entrepreneurial, if you have a high energy drive and a passion for food and people. If you fit that, then I think it's a great business to be in because it's quick moving, it's always changing, it's fun. You get to work with a lot of fun people, meet customers, share your recipes and your knowledge of food, and so it's great for people that understand that. Yes.
So for somebody who does have that killer recipe and they've got that entrepreneurial spirit and they're driven, what do you recommend to someone in Washington specifically who wants to start a restaurant? Because we know that there are some very unique challenges to running a business in Washington, specifically a restaurant. So what guidance would you give that person?
I definitely think they need to hire a good team to help guide them along through the process. I mean, we do that all the time. So it's really a process of permitting to guide them through that step, and then guide them through the process of licensing, and for them to understand all the licenses that you need to get as a restaurant, whether it's your liquor, your health, your building permits. So it's really to hire experts way before you're even looking for a location. We get people coming to us sometimes after they signed a lease, which is not ideal. But even before they sign a lease, they're about ready to sign a lease, and then they're thinking about all these things. So it's really to have a good group and to really plan at least 6 months to a year before you even think you're going to be signing a lease.
Now, you mentioned the lease. What are some issues that I guess would-be operators get themselves into in terms of the lease?
We see a lot of issues with this. Some of the big issues are people really not understanding the codes relative to things like the Class 1 or Class 2 hoods. So that's where your menu really comes into play, and understanding your menu relative to codes. Anything that has any grease needs a Class 1 hood, anything. And it could just be one menu item on it, and that's going to prompt that. Then you get into Class 1 hoods can only go into certain locations. And Class 1 hoods are more difficult to put in. They have to go up through a building vertically. So a lot of these spaces that you see vacant that say restaurant, they want a restaurant here, but it's in, say, a mixed-use building with, 5 or 6 floors above them, the landlord is kind of looking to you to spend a lot of money often to move that hood through their building. They haven't necessarily planned for it. And so part of that pre-lease negotiation then would be to say to the landlord, well, this is our menu, so maybe you can help us pay for this. If not, then it may be better to look at a different space or change your menu maybe. So that's where understanding your menu really helps in the infrastructure process as well. And then that also prompts things like grease interceptors maybe. A lot of buildings either can't take a grease interceptor, it's either too expensive, or it's just the infrastructure isn't there for it. So we see sometimes people even signing leases thinking they can put these things in, but then they can't. So it's really good to have a team, and not only to look to your broker, because they don't know all the technical elements a lot of times. That's not their expertise. But really, an architect, a contractor, people that are experienced in restaurants.
Now, you brought up an interesting point, and it's something that I think should be discussed a little bit. You said it's about 6 months to a year before you sign the lease. Well, then how much time are you paying on that lease before you can open your doors?
Well, that's 6 months to a year before you sign a lease. That team should be laying out a schedule for you. The schedule would include how long it takes to create permit drawings, how long it takes to create design drawings, how long it takes for construction, how long it takes for permit. So then you're able then to convey to your landlord and put in your lease the day that you truly could open, and then you should start paying rent, not before that. So again, part of that plan is to really plan out all the schedule as well, so you're not paying additional rent that you don't need to.
So you can secure a lease and then sort of identify that date that you want to open,
Exactly.
and your landlord will set you up to start paying your rent at that point.
Exactly. And some landlords are going to negotiate heavy on that. But again, that goes back to your sound plan. If you can show a landlord, well, a certain city takes 5 to 6 weeks to permit. It takes my architect 2 to 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. If you can show them a plan, then they're definitely more reasonable in the negotiations if they understand how long it's really going to take.
How are landlords in terms of, I guess, negotiating these days? And I guess a follow-up question to that would be, what are occupancy rates looking like?
We see, for instance, down in Seattle, the South Lake Union, which is a hot area, very hot area. But a lot of those buildings can't necessarily take a lot of the restaurant concepts because, again, they're not designed for the Class 1 hoods, so then they can only take certain types of restaurants. They're not as negotiable because it's a very hot area. But again, if you have a sound concept, a good team, even if you haven't had a restaurant before, but you really have an experienced team, a good brand, a good restaurant, good renderings, and a good team, you're more able to negotiate in these tough areas. So we're seeing occupancy still in the urban areas for restaurants pretty high. The vacancies are lower because people want to own restaurants in cities because it's still really busy.
We only have a few seconds left. Can you tell us your website?
www.dynamik with a K, Dynamik space.com.
Contact her now, because if you're interested in opening a restaurant, you're going to need her help. Melanie, thank you for being on our show today.
Thank you so much.